What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Bush coming at you solo today with, you know what time it is. It's week 11, starts and sits, quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. We're going through every matchup, talking about every fantasy relevant player and discussing whether you should start, sit them, flex them, drop them, all that kind of stuff. As always, guys, there is timestamps in the description as well as on the screen. So if you want to learn about a specific player, you want me to just talk about DeAndre Swift or something, that you can go to the Lions game, hear me talk about DeAndre Swift and what a stud he is. If at any point during this video you guys feel like you received some value, hit the like button. It helps us out tremendously. Leave any of your comments, start sit questions, trade targets, playoff schedule, whatever you want to talk about in the comments section down below, and subscribe for more great content. Hit the bell icon so you're notified anytime we go live or anytime we post videos. So let's hit the intro and we'll get into the first game. All right, before we get into the first game, guys, on bye week this week, we have the New York Giants, the San Francisco 49ers, Chicago Bears, and Buffalo Bills. So there's a couple notable receivers there, Allen Robinson, Stephon Diggs, and all that kind of stuff. So we're getting to the last of the big bye weeks. I believe week 13 is the last week of bye weeks with the Panthers and Bucs being on bye. So we should be at the end of the time where you have to start fringe kind of startable players. After that, we'll be able to just get into the normal starts and sits. And we don't have to worry about guys that you need to low end flex because you have Stephon Diggs on bye or whatever. All right, as usual, we're going to go through the fastest paced games of the week. On the screen right now, you'll see we have the fastest paced games of week 11 according to Football Outsiders neutral pace, as well as when teams are leading by plus or minus 6 points. I pulled that up as well because there really wasn't a whole lot of fast-paced games this week. We have the Cardinals and Seahawks on Thursday Night Football, which should be high-scoring, fast-paced, everything you love to see out of a fantasy football game, especially on Thursday night. Hopefully, it's not a complete stinker like every Thursday night football game. And then Rams at Buccaneers is the Monday night game, is also slated to be pretty fast-paced as well. And then Bengals at Washington football team Sunday afternoon should be a pretty fast-paced one as well. So speaking of Cardinals and Seahawks, Thursday Night Football, my quarterback 1 and 2 on the week are the two quarterbacks in this game. I'm low-key mad that this is on Thursday Night Football because it could be disappointing because it's Thursday Night Football. We've seen A.J. Brown last week is a perfect example of why you don't put superstar fantasy players on Thursday Night Football because they tend to disappoint. So Kyler is low-key on a historic pace. His worst game of the season is 26 fantasy points, which is absolutely bonkers, knowing that you are getting a guy that is going to put up 26 plus fantasy points in your lineup every single week. And not only how bonkers that is, but Russ was actually doing the same thing, except last week he had 18 fantasy points, which was his worst game of the year. But prior to that, both of these guys had never been below 26 fantasy points. So between these two dudes, we got one game under 26 fantasy points. And each guy in the first matchup between these two teams scored over 38 fantasy points the first time that these guys played. So you definitely want to be firing those guys up. And if you're doing a DFS lineup for Thursday Night Football, I know it's chalky, but you have to play both quarterbacks. You just have to. So to the running back position in this game, Drake is startable, flex Chase Edmonds, and then I would sit everyone from the Seahawks backfield unless Chris Carson plays. So if Chris Carson is not back, the Travis Homer, Alex Collins, DJ Dallas mess is not something I want a part of. Each guy played about 30% of the snaps and got a solid amount of work, but neither guy was a leader in the clubhouse. So unless Chris Carson's back, sit all the running backs for the Seahawks. Kenyon Drake returns to this backfield to what it was pretty much pre-injury, where Drake was getting 15 to 20 carries per game and a target or two here and there. And then Edmonds was getting 5 to 8 carries per game and 3 to 7 targets. So both guys are back into their original roles before Drake went out with the injury. Drake returns to the borderline kind of top 20 range of a running back that he was. And Edmonds returns to high-end RB3 territory where you can kind of flex him week in and week out. And then to the wide receiver position in this game, you start DK Metcalf, you start Tyler Lockett, you start DeAndre Hopkins, and then you flex Christian Kirk. Pretty simple in this game. Metcalf has low-key been awful against Arizona. I can't remember exactly who it was, but someone tweeted out his stat lines. And nonetheless, he's scored like less than 5 fantasy points in every game against Arizona in his short career. He's only played them 3 times, but nonetheless, he's not been good against Arizona, probably because he's been matched up against Patrick Peterson, and teams have notoriously not thrown at Patrick Peterson just because of kind of name value. Patrick Peterson not necessarily playing the greatest, but he still is an elite corner in his own right, as far as his career track record has gotten. So like teams are just not necessarily throwing at him. And this has notoriously been a spot where Tyler Lockett has been the best receiver to start from this receiver core, hence the wide receiver one performance that he had the first time these two teams played. We'll have to monitor Tyler Lockett's status heading into this game. As Pete Carroll said, he's dealing with a knee sprain. I'm not exactly sure what the severity of that is or how it's going to affect him for this game, but it is a Thursday nighter. And if he's dealing with something, it puts his status in jeopardy. In terms of the matchups, you see DK Metcalf going up against Patrick Peterson, probably going to be a shadow matchup. And then Tyler Lockett against Byron Murphy in the slot. Byron Murphy's been solid, but we saw what Tyler Lockett did to him last time these two teams played. As far as the Arizona side of the receiver position, 10 for 103 and 1 for DeAndre Hopkins in the first meeting. He should be in store for a big one in this game. The boom games for Christian Kirk have come to an end. It looks to be that way, but he is the number 2 in this offense. He got his usual 6 to 8 targets over the past couple of weeks, and he ran the second most routes on the team last week. So in this matchup, he's got a good shot for a big play against the Seahawks defense that up until last week against the Rams was just absolutely giving away fantasy points to the receiver position. Matchup wise, you see DeAndre Hopkins going up against Trey Flowers, absolute smash matchup for him. And then Christian Kirk going up against Lyndon Stevens, who's low key been kind of good, but Christian Kirk gets moved around to the slot, outside, all that kind of stuff. So I wouldn't be too worried about Lyndon Stevens, who I'm not really overly worried about anyway. I think he's just had a couple good games that he's played. And then as far as tight ends goes in this game, there's absolutely no tight ends to speak of on either side of the ball. So don't worry about starting a tight end in this game. All right, to the 1 p.m. slate, we have the Bengals at the Washington football team. To the quarterback position in this game, you sit Alex Smith and you can stream Joe Burrow. It's not a great matchup for Joe Burrow in the Bengals passing game in this one, but even though Washington's defense has been quite stingy against the pass, Burrow's volume on a week-over-week basis, plus a bit of rushing on his end, should be enough to make him a top 15 guy this week. As far as Alex Smith is concerned, he threw the ball 55 times last week against the Lions, and he still sucked. So I'm not really, just because it's the Bengals like matchup, I'm not really itching to start Alex Smith. You could probably throw him into your lineup if you're screwed and you have a couple guys on bye or whatever, but he's like my quarterback 22 on the week, so I think you should have better options out there. To the running back position in this game, you start whatever running back for the Bengals is healthy. And then for the Washington side of things, you start Gibson and you can flex McKissick. So we don't have an update on Joe Mixon yet. He should be back for this week based on timelines from his initial injury. Some of the FB docs were like, oh, he's going to be out like 4 weeks, which would put him on track to start this week. But if he's out, it's Gio season. And Gio Bernard's going to get the bulk of the work if that's the case. On the Washington side of things, Gibson has been kind of relegated to early down work, getting an astonishing less than 3% of his work on third downs this season. So they basically are just pulling him off the field on third down. And it's because he's a terrible pass protector. That is why he's getting pulled off the field. He was a wide receiver in college, so he didn't get a lot of reps in pass protection. He's clearly struggling with it in the pros. And my thing is, if you're a bad pass protector, why not just put him in the backfield on third down and put him on a route and not in pass protection? But I guess with McKissick being able to do both things, it only makes sense for him to be the third down back. Plus, if the quarterback has to check and leave the running back in pass protection, then he can do that with McKissick on the field. Anyway, on the Sunday stream for McKissick, I literally said, and I quote, "No way he gets 14 targets again." Well, he got 15. So I guess I was wrong on that. And he's a top 28 running back option if he's going to get anywhere past the 6 to 8 target range. On the wide receiver side of things in this game, you could start Terry McLaurin, start T. Higgins, flex Tyler Boyd, and then I would sit AJ Green. So Terry McLaurin sees William Jackson in coverage for the first game of shadow corner season for Terry McLaurin against Detroit last week. He saw 9 targets, 7 receptions, and 95 yards. And this game against William Jackson could be his biggest game of the season because, William Jackson's an okay corner, but he's nothing compared to Terry McLaurin. And then as far as the Bengals side of things goes, toughest matchup you can get against wide receivers. The Washington football team is allowing the least amount of points to the fantasy wide receiver position. So both Boyd and Higgins definitely see a downgrade. But as far as Higgins is concerned, since week 3, he has not scored less than 10.2 PPR fantasy points. He has between 7 and 9 targets in 6 to 7 of those games. He's the wide receiver 13 in points per game, wide receiver 10 overall since week 3, averaging 16.9 points per game, which is higher than McLaurin, Ridley, Woods, Kupp, Amari, Thielen, and Golladay. I talked about this on the Sunday stream, or on the Monday stream, but I thought I'd reiterate it. T. Higgins has been incredible, and he has earned a spot in your starting lineup, not just as like a flex play, but like a full-time permanent slot in your starting lineup. And if he has a down game in this one, it's because of the matchup, not because of anything T. Higgins did, but I still think he is worth starting as a top 20 receiver, even if he is slated to potentially have a down game. Going up against Ronald Darby, T. Higgins is, he does have a bit of a disadvantage. Ronald Darby's been pretty good. Tyler Boyd against Jimmy Moreland is actually the best matchup on the field. And then AJ Green, I'm just not willing to trust AJ Green with him just overall not looking that good, and then seeing his targets kind of downtick the past couple weeks. To the tight end position in this game, do I want to start Logan Thomas? No, but can you? Probably. So the tight end position is getting really, really bad, really, really fast. And Logan Thomas is actually in my top 15, believe it or not, because the position is just that bad. So if you need to start Logan Thomas, I think you can. I don't think I'd want to. If you're in a position where you have to start Logan Thomas, I hope it's because you have a guy on bye and not that's your rest of season tight end, because you're probably not going to win a championship with a tight end that bad unless you have an elite roster everywhere else. On to the next game. We have the Falcons at the Saints. This one should be a fun one. You start Matt Ryan, and then my start of the week is Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston owns the Falcons. As a Tampa Bay Bucs fan, I know that Jameis Winston literally eviscerates the Falcons every time he plays them. So that is definitely encouraging to see. Obviously, he's in a different offense now, but you can cue the average depth of target stuff about Jameis Winston in this offense. He's like, oh, well, since he came in for Drew Brees, he only is throwing like a 5 ADOT or whatever. It's like, okay, first of all, he wasn't even the designated starter. He didn't get to practice all week, so that's why he was given easy completions. Jameis is not going to be a check down king. I can tell you that right now. A wise man has once said, when someone shows you who they are, you believe them. Jameis has shown us who he is over and over again. He reads the field high to low. He's looking for the deep shot. And most quarterbacks, for the record, who read the field high to low do that because they have the arm to push it downfield, which Drew Brees clearly does not. He is going to push the ball downfield more than Brees did. Obviously, he's not going to push it downfield as much as he did last year in Bruce Arians' offense, but I still think this offense sees an upgrade from like a passing yardage perspective, potentially touchdowns and obviously interceptions with Jameis Winston. He over the next 3 weeks, which is Drew Brees is slated to miss between 2 and 4 weeks. So I'd imagine Jameis Winston is going to start all of these games. He plays Atlanta twice, Denver and Philadelphia over the next month. So, I mean, it's wheels up for Jameis Winston. He was definitely the number one pickup at the quarterback position this past week in waivers, and I think you can start him probably for the next 4 weeks. As far as Matt Ryan is concerned, he coming off of his bye, he finally has, or at least he should have his full assortment of weapons back amid a stretch where he plays some easy matchups as well. He has New Orleans twice, Las Vegas and the Chargers. So if Calvin Ridley is back for this game, which, I mean, we don't really know that for sure, but even if he isn't, Matt Ryan still should be a great option. And if Calvin Ridley's out for this game, he should be back for next week. So I think Matt Ryan is going to be a great option going forward for the rest of the month here of November and maybe early into December as well. To the running back position in this game, it's pretty easy. You start Kamara and you start Todd Gurley, and you don't start Latavius Murray unless you're desperate. Only Kamara would have 33 points in fantasy with 15 rushing yards. I just wanted to point that out. I've heard other people say it too, but it's just hilarious that that's how strong his receiving floor is. And that's how much he has like a monopoly on the goal line, that Alvin Kamara is literally 15 rushing yards is not a bad day for him when it would be for like 99% of other running backs, maybe only Christian McCaffrey being the other one. Todd Gurley in this game, he finally has his difficult stretch coming. The previous like 5 weeks or whatever, he was playing Carolina twice and Green Bay and all these like shit teams that are awful against the run. Gurley finally has some tough matchups coming, and it starts this week in New Orleans. New Orleans has been really good against the run. I don't think they've allowed a 100-yard rusher in like 2 years. So I don't expect Todd Gurley to be very good in this game. Obviously, a touchdown will save his day, as it usually does for Todd Gurley, but if he doesn't get into the end zone, he will disappoint you this week. To the wide receiver position in this game, start Julio. You start Ridley if he plays. As I mentioned, you start Michael Thomas, and then I would say you could low-end flex Emmanuel Sanders. Ridley's status remains unclear. I believe this is the same injury that Joe Mixon has currently, and it might be a bit more minor than what Joe Mixon is dealing with, but I thought he'd be back for this week. We'll see how the week progresses. PFF currently, if you see the matchup chart there, they don't expect Ridley to be back just yet, but we'll have to see how his practice goes. If he's limited in Wednesday and Thursday and then he full participates on Friday, he's probably going to play. Julio Jones going up against Marshawn Lattimore is one of the higher advantages on the week in terms of wide receiver cornerback matchups. But and then on the New Orleans side of things, you look at Thomas's matchup, and on the screen right now, you'll see he has a 64% advantage over Kendall Sheffield. And normally when you see when a wide receiver has an advantage like that, it's usually because the wide receiver has like a PFF grade of like 90 or something like that. In this case, it's the opposite. Kendall Sheffield is currently the worst corner in the NFL, according to PFF. I see a small upgrade for Thomas in terms of Jameis Winston starting over Drew Brees. Obviously, the accuracy of his short targets that Michael Thomas usually gets are not going to be as good as Drew Brees, because Jameis Winston, as good as he is, kind of in that intermediate range, is not Drew Brees. But we could see a bit more of like a downfield type attack for Michael Thomas with Jameis Winston as the quarterback. I'm just kind of speculating there. I don't expect Thomas's role to change all that much, but the odd like deep target that he does get, I expect Winston to hit it more likely than Brees. But we'll see kind of how it plays out. As I mentioned with Emmanuel Sanders, he's going up against AJ Terrell, who's actually been pretty good in his rookie season. So Emmanuel Sanders probably not going to be a great start in this game, even though Atlanta is susceptible to the wide receiver position. Terrell has actually been the lone bright spot in terms of the Atlanta pass defense. But Jameis Winston, if he is anything like the Jameis Winston I saw in Tampa Bay, is going to make more than one fantasy receiver relevant in this offense. I can promise you that. To the tight end position in this game, both guys are in my top 10. Hayden Hurst should see a bump if Calvin Ridley is out again, and Jared Cook may see a bump with Winston as quarterback. We've seen in Tampa Bay that Jameis Winston will use his tight ends, not only in the red zone like Drew Brees uses Jared Cook, but between the 20s as well. So we might see additional targets for Jared Cook over the next couple of weeks with Jameis Winston as the quarterback. To the next game, Steelers at Jaguars. We have Big Ben. He's definitely a start in this game. And then you sit Jake Luton. I still can't pronounce the guy's name. Anyway, Big Ben is on a 4-game streak of at least 2 touchdowns, and we finally saw a ceiling game for him last week. He firmly is in my top 8 among quarterbacks against the Jaguars defense that is giving away fantasy points to the quarterback position, the running back position, the wide receiver position. They just can't stop anyone. Dead last in Football Outsiders total defense DVOA. Terrible against the pass, terrible against the run. So should be wheels up for the passing game in Big Ben this week. The running game, as I mentioned, should be a good matchup for them as well. Connor has had some bad games, but this should be a get-right spot for him against the Jags defense. And then James Robinson, obviously going up against the Steelers run defense is not a great matchup, but his ability to get targets in the passing game and stuff and be able to get the ball on the goal line should be able to buoy his fantasy production for the day. If not, but I would expect a bit of a down performance from James Robinson because he ain't running on the Steelers run defense. To the wide receiver position in this game, you start all 3 Steelers wide receivers. You start DJ Chark, and then I would sit Keelan Cole. Each guy kind of brings something different to the table in terms of the Steelers wide receiver core. I think regardless of matchup, you have to continue playing all 3 of these guys. As you can see the matchups there, Deontay Johnson going up against Sidney Jones, who's actually been kind of good for the Jags, low-key. Chase Claypool against CJ Henderson's been kind of up and down in his rookie season. And then Juju Smith-Schuster has the best matchup against Trey Herndon in the slot. So it might be a Juju game, but who knows with these guys? Any one of these guys or all 3 of these guys could go off any week. So you definitely want to be starting all 3, though, because these three corners in this pass defense has been susceptible to pretty much anyone this season, and these receivers should be no exception to that rule. To the Jags side of things, DJ Chark obviously had a down game last week in a spot where he would have been considered DFS chalk with Kevin King and Jair Alexander both out in that game. But unfortunately, the weather had other plans. And because DJ Chark is the downfield weapon in that offense, it was a bit difficult for him to catch his like deep balls or whatever. You saw Jake Luton actually miss him, kind of underthrew him on a deep ball in that game. Maybe that was because of the wind. Maybe it's because Jake Luton isn't really that good. Either way, he was 1 catch away from having a monster game anyway. So wide receiver 2 is kind of where I see DJ Chark. He's locked and loaded in that range with week winning upside any given week that he's on the field, but especially these next few weeks where he has some excellent matchups in this game going up against Joe Hayden, who's kind of lost a step as far as speed goes. So that shouldn't be a great matchup for Joe Hayden because he's got to deal with a guy who runs a 4.340 and is a big body guy, and Joe Hayden is a small dude. So I think DJ Chark should be in for a good game in this one. The Steelers, while they're great against running backs and they're a little bit stingy against quarterbacks, have been susceptible to the fantasy wide receiver position. So I think DJ Chark should be in for a great matchup in this one. To the tight end position in this game, Eric Ebron had a bad game last week, but he still saw 6 targets. So he remains in that top 10 tight end range for someone you can depend on for between 5 and 8 targets per game. So I wouldn't be too concerned if you had a dud game from Eric Ebron last week. It was just a bad game. Again, that matchup had weather concerns as well. So hopefully, I mean, we're in November now. Hopefully weather can fuck off and just let us have fantasy football unimpeded by weather. But there's a good chance over the next couple of weeks, we're going to have more games impacted by weather. And you guys got to make sure that you are following certain guys on Twitter. There's Kevin Roth is a weatherman on Twitter who does fantasy stuff. So you make sure you're following guys like that, because it's the difference between a start to sit decision. If you had DJ Chark last week, I would have told you to sit him for other guys because of the weather concerns. So make sure you're tuning into our live streams as well. Sunday morning, we'll definitely be talking about weather if there is any for any of the games. So to the Patriots at Texans, at the quarterback position, you start both quarterbacks. Cam Newton obviously is got the highest rushing floor of any quarterback not named Kyler Murray or Lamar Jackson. So he should be good to go any given week. And then the Texans are also tied for the 5th most in the NFL, allowing 18 passing touchdowns. So we might even see Cam Newton have a solid outing from a passing perspective in this game. Deshaun Watson should bounce back from a game I'm honestly just willing to throw out for Deshaun Watson, because due to the conditions, as I've mentioned, Watson was a pivot candidate. If you had Deshaun Watson, I had Tom Brady as well in my main home league, and I pivoted to Tom Brady because Deshaun Watson's weather conditions. I was like, okay, so Tom Brady's in a solid matchup. I think I can easily start him. I downgraded Deshaun Watson to like QB 10 on the week following the announcement that we were going to have bad weather. But I'm not concerned for him overall. He'd been excellent up until that game, and the weather kind of just threw a wrench into that. I think he'll be fine in this one, even though the Patriots have been a little stingy against the quarterbacks. I still think Deshaun Watson's gonna eat in this game. To the running back position in this one, you have a little bit of a messy situation in New England, but I do think Damian Harris is a startable guy. Do we have a Patriots running back that we can trust? Probably not, because he's not going to catch 5 passes a game or anything like that. Rex Burkhead might steal touchdowns every now and then, but he is the back to own in this backfield. I think a top 24 guy for the Patriots, running really hard, running really well. He looks like the best running back on the team, but Bill Belichick is still going to sub in Rex Burkhead and James White when he feels like it. So don't think you have a locked and loaded RB1 with Damian Harris. He is an RB2 because he is still part of a committee, but he's definitely the best running back in that committee and the running back you want to own for fantasy from that committee. Speaking of committees, that we do not have a committee in the Texans. 95% of the snaps Duke Johnson saw without David Johnson in the lineup, and virtually all the work. Duke being inefficient, which he will be because he's not very good, just means wheels up for Deshaun Watson. But because Duke Johnson is getting so much volume, he's getting all the rushing work, he's getting all the goal line work, he's getting all the receiving work. He is definitely the running back to own, and he is a top 20 running back this week. Wide receiver wise in this game, the Texans, both the Texans receivers are startable, and I think you could flex Jacoby Myers as well. We've seen Jacoby Myers just get peppered with targets these past couple of weeks. He should be going up against Bradley Roby, according to PFF, potentially in a shadow matchup, as Roby's been used as a shadow more than any other corner in the NFL this year. So he's probably going to be on Myers like glue. He's a top 36 option, but he may have a bit of a tougher time this week against Bradley Roby, who's been the Texans' only good corner. And then as far as the Texans receivers goes, both of them should see a better matchup this week with the weather not being a factor. Prior to this week, neither guy had seen less than 10 PPR points since Bill O'Brien's firing. Will Fuller against Jason McCourty should be wheels up for Will Fuller, and Brandon Cooks against JC Jackson, who's been kind of up and down. He's still pretty good corner, obviously, but I think both of these guys are in my top 20, and both of them are every week starts as long as the weather is not an issue. To the tight end position in this game, there's absolutely no tight ends that I want to start from this game. No team has a reliable tight end to speak of. To the Eagles and Browns, both quarterbacks are streamable, but neither is an excellent option. Quarterback 16 and 21 respectively for me. Carson Wentz and Baker Mayfield have both been solid in good matchups, but both guys are too inconsistent to trust over some other options. So we've seen Carson Wentz and Baker Mayfield have good matchups and perform. We've also seen them have good matchups and disappoint. Carson Wentz against Dallas a couple weeks ago being one of those examples. To the running back position in this game, Miles Sanders, Nick Chubb, and Kareem Hunt. You start them all. All three are top 15 running backs for me. 72% of snaps 5 targets, 15 carries, looks awesome at football. That's all things that you can describe Miles Sanders as last week. He should have had way more fantasy points than he did, according to a lot of the people that had Miles Sanders were just biting their nails the whole game because he could have been a lot better on the week. But fire Miles Sanders to the moon. He's a top 10 running back rest of the season. To the Browns running backs, they're both studs, obviously. They both get 15 to 22 touches per game. They're both going to be uber efficient on them because they're two of the best 7 running backs in the NFL. And they're both on the same team. And their running back scheme is one of the best in the NFL, and their offensive line is great at run blocking. So this is the only backfield where you can confidently start both guys every single week. It's going to stay that way for the rest of the season. And these two guys are both top 15 running backs, and they should. If you held on to Nick Chubb, and he's a guy that you were holding throughout his injury, you probably looked pretty smart because Nick Chubb is going to be a league winner if you held him or if you traded for him while he was injured. To the wide receiver position in this game, Jarvis Landry and Travis Fulgham are both starts for me, and you can low end flex Jalen Reagor. For some reason, Travis Fulgham has just got buried in ECR. He's like wide receiver 40. I don't understand why he's so low. I still view him as an every week flex play at worst. Reagor's emergence in the offense, I think it just helps it overall. I think Carson Wentz will start to play better when he has 2 receivers he can count on and a tight end and potentially another tight end coming back from injury that he can count on. So I'm not really a big proponent, even though Jalen Reagor, I'll put this on the screen right now, but Jalen Reagor ran more routes than Travis Fulgham last week. I still think Travis Fulgham is the wide receiver to own right now. That could change, obviously, if we see Travis Fulgham's role continue to diminish with Jalen Reagor coming back. But Travis Fulgham has shown enough for me to believe in him as like a solid wide receiver 3 option. So I'll continue to roll him out there. And I think Reagor is also kind of startable in this game. The matchups are as follows. You can see Travis Fulgham against Terrence Mitchell. That's a pretty big advantage, Fulgham. And then Jalen Reagor against Denzel Ward is not the greatest matchup in the world. I would probably have said you could flex Reagor comfortably if it wasn't for the matchup against Ward. So maybe downgrade him. And I think this is probably a week where Travis Fulgham and Dallas Goedert and Miles Sanders get the majority of work, and Jalen Reagor is kind of left on the outside looking in. And then as far as the Browns side of things goes, Jarvis Landry is the only guy I'm willing to start. He goes up against Crayvon LeBlanc in the slot. Should be an easy matchup for him. Again, back-to-back bad weather games for the Cleveland Browns. Since Odell's injury, we haven't seen Jarvis's target ceiling or his reception ceiling or his yardage ceiling yet since Odell went down, because they've had 2 back-to-back bad weather games and a bye week. So 16 targets for him over those 2 games is pretty promising, but I think he has even more to go in an upward trajectory because we haven't seen him yet with Odell out of the lineup. And as far as the tight ends go in this game, both of them are startable. Obviously, usage for Dallas Goedert last week was great. It was excellent. As you can see on the screen right now, I talked about his usage on Monday, 92% of snaps, 34 routes run, and 6 targets. Like, that is workhorse tight end usage. Like, Mark Andrews doesn't even get usage like that. And then obviously the big concern with Dallas Goedert is the fact that Zach Ertz was activated off IR. I don't expect him to play in this game. He'll probably be practicing and play next week. So for this week, at least, he should be a top tight end option. Dallas Goedert is in my top 6, I believe. So no worries about starting him this week. Next week, obviously, could be a different story if we have Zach Ertz coming back. And then again, with the weather, Austin Hooper just hasn't seen the target volume we hope to see since Odell's been out. But again, I think the weather has been a big proponent of that, with Baker only throwing 45 times over the last 2 weeks that he's played, and they had a bye week as well. So I think Austin Hooper should be on track to finally have a pretty solid game in this one, with the weather hopefully not being an issue. Obviously, if Sunday morning comes and the weather in Philadelphia is terrible, then we have another bad weather game for the Cleveland Browns, and we'll have to downgrade their passing game as a result. To the next game, Lions at Panthers. Both quarterbacks in this game are streamable. Stafford's probably a pretty solid option, and Bridgewater's kind of a back-end option. Neither defense is overly great at stopping opposing quarterbacks, but neither of these guys present a high weekly ceiling either. Both are top 20 options for me, but neither is in my top 12. I think either guy is startable if you have a guy like I don't even know who's on bye this week. Josh Allen on bye, and you need to start one of these guys. I think you can do so, but I wouldn't expect a high weekly ceiling from either of them because Stafford missing Kenny Golladay is obviously a big deal, and Teddy Bridgewater is just kind of banged up. And if he even plays at all, to be honest, we might even see PJ Walker in this one. To the running back position, my start of the week is DeAndre Swift. You guys probably could have seen that coming. And Mike Davis is also a start in this one. Talking about DeAndre Swift, his usage. If you didn't tune into our Monday night stream, I talked about this already, but reports surfaced early Sunday morning that DeAndre Swift was going to be named the starting running back for the Lions before Week 10. And I kind of brushed it off, to be honest. On the Sunday morning stream, I'm like, okay, what does that mean? Like, he's going to get 50% of snaps instead of his usual 44%. No, it meant he was going to be the starting running back for the Lions. 73% of the snaps, 5 targets, 16 of the 21 running back carries, 25 of the 41 running back routes in what would be considered a negative game script, considering that they were leading the whole game, which is generally a good game script for running backs. But because DeAndre Swift was previously the third down back of the team, a negative game script for him meant they were up, and we would have seen a lot of Adrian Peterson. But that wasn't the case, which is very, very promising to see, knowing that DeAndre Swift, I mean, he's in my top 5 on this week because he's going up against Carolina, and Carolina's been terrible against the run. So, I mean, DeAndre Swift could be a league-winning type running back the way that Miles Sanders was last year. I think that kind of usage and that kind of workhorse volume is what we can expect to see from DeAndre Swift going forward. Mike Davis, on the other hand, is kind of going in the other direction of DeAndre Swift. It's something to monitor, the fact that he only saw like 50% of the snaps last week, especially considering in a bad game script, Davis is usually the receiving threat. So with Tampa up all game last week, we could have expected Mike Davis to see like 6, 7, 8 targets if this were the early days when Christian McCaffrey first went out. But we saw his role shrink in this past week. So plus he got injured and now he's banged up. So I'm not really confident in Mike Davis as like a top 10 running back anymore. I think he's still in my top 20, but he's the guy that is more matchup dependent than we were giving him credit for. Before, he was kind of just like, oh, he's just like 75% of Christian McCaffrey. I don't think he's like that anymore. I think he is more part of a committee than we're really giving him credit for at this point. And I think it is something to monitor going forward. But this is a good matchup, so you definitely can start him. To the wide receiver position in this game, DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson are starts. You can flex Marvin Jones and Curtis Samuel in this game. So Marvin Jones versus Rasul Douglas in this one. I wouldn't expect Kenny Golladay to play. I don't think he's going to be back. I think he's probably going to be another week or two, which makes Marvin Jones a top 36 option in a decent matchup. On the Carolina side of things, DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson are every week wide receiver 2/flexes. And in this game, they face a much easier matchup than they did against Carlton Davis for Robbie Anderson and the Bucs defense in general. You can see DJ Moore going up against Desmond Trufant, who's been absolutely washed up. Robbie Anderson against Amani Oruwariye. Always screw that guy's name up. Either way, both of those guys have great matchups, and Curtis Samuel actually does have the toughest matchup on the week, which probably means he's going to go off because he had the easiest matchup last week against Sean Murphy-Bunting. But Curtis Samuel is an enigma. If you want to roll him out there and risk it, you can, but I probably don't want to start him if I can help it. To the tight end position, you start TJ Hawkinson. He finally broke his streak of solid performances. He'd pretty much not had a bust game all season until this past week. But with Kenny Golladay still out, he's definitely in a great spot. To the next game that we have here, the Titans at the Ravens. Quarterback-wise in this game, both of them are top 15 options. Both Tannehill and Lamar should bounce back from their lackluster Week 10 performances. Ravens are a good defense, but they're not invincible. I would feel much better about Tannehill if the Ravens were not at home, but they are at home. So Tannehill is like a back-end quarterback 50, or he's quarterback 15, I believe, for me. So he's a back-end like startable guy. But I still think you can start him because the Titans offense is good enough to beat a defense like this. In the NFL in 2020, defenses can't really clamp offenses like they could in 1985. But yeah, Tannehill is definitely not a great option this week, but you definitely can still start him. And then Lamar going up against a solid passing offense, or a solid matchup for a passing offense, and not in a monsoon of rain this week, should be a lot better than he was against New England on Sunday night. To the running back position, you start Derrick Henry as per usual, and you sit them all. All the Ravens running backs, you sit them. And this makes me very sad, obviously, because I have Dobbins ranked the highest currently, but with Ingram back in this backfield, it's going to revert back the way it was before Ingram went out, which was a complete mess, and we didn't know who to start. Unfortunately for J.K. Dobbins, because he was starting to look like he could have been this year's Miles Sanders, that league-winning rookie running back at the back half of the season that takes over his backfield and becomes a workhorse. But unless Mark Ingram gets hurt again or Gus Edwards gets hurt again, I don't expect that to happen. This past week, Gus Edwards led the team in carries. Ingram started the game, and Dobbins led the team in snaps. So complete mess, three-way timeshare. don't start any of them. Dobbins is an absolute desperation play if you have to play one, but I would avoid this backfield entirely. To the wide receiver position in this game, you start A.J. Brown, you can sit Corey Davis, and you sit Hollywood Brown. So Hollywood Brown going up against Malcolm Butler is, I mean, I guess a good matchup, but Hollywood has been bad. You can't start him until he and Lamar improve. This should be a get-right spot for the passing game. Last week's weather obviously didn't help, but I can't start Hollywood Brown until he actually shows me something, because he's had like one good week this entire season. A.J. Brown on the other side of things should definitely bounce back in this one. The Ravens are not an easy matchup by any stretch, but I would not count on A.J. Brown putting up 2 straight weeks of bad games. I think last week is probably behind him. He's going up against Marlon Humphrey, who's a great corner, obviously, but A.J. Brown is a physical specimen and a great receiver. I expect him to win that matchup. But I would sit Corey Davis going up against Marcus Peters, because Corey Davis, unlike A.J. Brown, is not a great receiver. He's playing pretty good, but I don't expect Marcus Peters to give him too much rope in terms of how much he can get done against him. To the tight end position in this game, both of them are top 10 options for me. Neither guy is really safe week over week like we thought they could have been earlier in the season, but both of these guys, Andrews and Jonnu Smith, have tremendous ceilings, and they should be treated as such. There's only maybe 3 other tight ends, Kittle, Kelsey, and Waller, who have the weekly ceiling that Jonnu Smith and Mark Andrews have. So don't shy away from these guys. They're definitely still top 5 options, I would say, because, I mean, the tight end position is dropping like flies left and right. If you want to be mad at Jonnu Smith and Mark Andrews, you can, but like, who are you going to pivot to? Unless you have Travis Kelce on your team, you really don't have anyone better. So as far as Mark Andrews is concerned, we saw a great sign for him, him leading the Ravens in targets with 8 last week. Even in a complete monsoon rainstorm, he still managed to get a solid target share. Hopefully this is a sign of things to come as their schedule eases up. I talked about it on the trade targets video a couple of weeks ago, that their schedule is very favorable the back half of the season. And hopefully Mark Andrews and Lamar Jackson can get back to how they were playing at the beginning of the season before they faced that drought of difficult matchups in the middle of the season that they just went through. So 4 p.m., Jets at Chargers. You start Justin Herbert in this game. Even in a bad matchup against Miami, Herbert still does fantasy owners good, and he will be in my top 5 this week at home against New York. You could bet on that. He is going to be a stud this week. To the running back position, you sit the Jets running backs and you start Kalen Ballage. I can't believe I just said you start Kalen Ballage. We're at that point of the NFL season where running backs are dropping like flies, and Kalen Ballage is suddenly a thing. I need Austin Eckler to please come back. We all really miss you. We want you to be a top 3 running back, because you will be once you come back with this offense. To the wide receiver position in this game, Keenan Allen is obviously a start, and then you can flex Jamison Crowder and Mike Williams. Allen's shown that he's actually human, and he finally had a bad game, and he faces by far the best Jets corner this week. As you can see on the screen there, he goes up against Brian Poole, who is their best corner, even though the Jets' pass defense in general just kind of sucks. But we might see a Mike Williams explosion game in this one. He's going up against LaShawn Austin, who Jacoby Myers absolutely rinsed a couple of weeks ago, and I think Mike Williams is probably about to do the same. So it could be a Mike Williams game, but you obviously still start Keenan Allen regardless. To the Jets side of things, this is probably the first time all season that I've shown the Jets receiver chart, because normally it was just, okay, Jamison Crowder is the only receiver that you start there. Who's he going up against? But the Perriman breakout warmed my heart. As you all know, if you were fans of this channel back in the summer, I did like Brashad Perriman as a late round dart throw. But Crowder is still the guy to own, in my opinion. He was coming off of an injury last game, and he should be back to his full role. Denzel Mims is a nice story too. He's looking like he's kind of ascending as a talent. These 3 guys, other than Jamison Crowder, you can't count on Brashad Perriman and Denzel Mims. If you're desperate, you could throw either of them into your lineup and just hope for a big play. But chances are, if you have to rely on those guys, you're probably not looking too good this week. To the tight end position in this game, Hunter Henry finally scored a touchdown after being labeled a positive touchdown regression candidate for about 10 weeks now. Hunter Henry has consistently been a guy that me and Danny are lower on, just because he's not really a high upside dude. He needs to catch a touchdown to be good. And prior to last week, he hadn't been catching touchdowns. So he's still a top 10 tight end, obviously, because the tight end position is gross. But there's better options out there. Let's just put it that way. If you have a guy like Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry, I would start Jonnu Smith every time, because we've seen the ceiling of Jonnu Smith on a weekly basis, and I think their floors are actually pretty close. So to the Dolphins at Broncos, At the quarterback position, you can stream Tua in this game and you sit Drew Lock. We saw another game manager type outing for Tua last week. He should be usable this week, but I'm not going to go crazy ranking him top 15 or anything until he proves he's at the level of Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow in terms of fantasy production. I'm not ranking him near those guys because those two dudes, despite being rookie quarterbacks, have proven to be top 10 fantasy quarterbacks so far this season. And I think Tua has a ways to go before he gets to that point. I think his team around him is just so much better than those two guys that he doesn't really have to do everything. Unlike Herbert and Burrow, obviously, they're winning more games because of it. So I think they're not going to just be like, hey, kid, do all the work for us. We have good special teams. We have good defense. There's not really any need for that to happen. To the running back position in this game, you start Salvin Ahmed and you flex Melvin Gordon and you sit Phillip Lindsay. So speaking on Salvin Ahmed, his usage is on the screen right now. You'll see it 44 out of 58 snaps, 76% snap share last week, 22 touches, 21 of them carries, 15 out of the 23 running back routes, 8 out of 8 red zone touches. They just cut Jordan Howard, which is pretty wild. And from a coaching perspective, not only is Salvin Ahmed a great start this week, but going forward, whoever the workhorse role is of the Dolphins offense, we've seen Brian Flores does not come from the same school of thought, or I guess not Brian Flores, but Shane Gailey, the offensive coordinator, does not come from the same school of thought as we've seen of recent Patriots cast-offs where they want to use a running back by committee and they want to be exactly like Josh McDaniels and Bill Belichick. No, this dude's given a workhorse running back like probably every week so far this season. It's been Myles Gaskin most of the time, but since Myles Gaskin has been out, Salvin Ahmed has gotten most of the work. And I think the most telling thing of this from a dynasty perspective is whichever running back lands here next year. And I do think they're going to draft a running back high because they're starting to have a pretty complete team. And one of their few biggest holes is the running back position. They have a 7th round pick in Myles Gaskin starting for them normally and an undrafted free agent in Salvin Ahmed starting for them right now. So if a Travis Etienne were to fall to the 2nd round, damn right they're going to pick him because he's a 1st-round talent. And if he's there in the 2nd round, he is going to be the 101 in dynasty drafts because they have proven that they're going to use a workhorse running back that they trust. As far as the Broncos backfield goes, it's not as clear-cut as the Dolphins backfield. It remains pretty risky, but Gordon is still the starting running back in this backfield, and the lack of productivity for both guys last week was likely due to game script. They were kind of getting blown out, and Drew Lock had to throw them back into that game against the Raiders. So they should be in a better situation this week, but it is still a good defense and a good team in general. So they might get blown out again against the Dolphins, especially if Drew Lock continues to turn the ball over. To the wide receiver position in this game, Jerry Jeudy and Devontae Parker are the only 2 receivers I'm willing to start. Devontae Parker is going up against AJ Boye, and Parker has been somewhat disappointing this season, but this is a great matchup for him, and I expect him to get on track as like a low-end wide receiver 2 this week. Jeudy averaging just under 11 targets per game is just absolutely excellent over the last few weeks, makes him startable as a top 36 guy, but I want to see him do it in a tough matchup because we've seen his good games have come against the Falcons and like these bad defenses. I want to see him do it against a good defense, and this is a good defense. And as you can see on the screen there, he's matched up with Xavier Howard, who gave Keenan Allen a lot of struggles last week. So if Jerry Jeudy is able to do it against Xavier Howard, then I'm definitely willing to believe KJ Hamler and Tim Patrick are low-end flex plays if you absolutely need to play them. KJ Hamler finally starting to see some volume, looking kind of explosive as well. But again, I'm not really willing to start him quite yet. I think he still has a ways to go before he's into startable territory. To the tight end position in this game, you start Noah Fant and you can stream Mike Gesicki. Noah Fant has topped 6+ targets in 5 of his last 6 games, which solidifies him due to ceiling on any given play. We know Noah Fant is a freak athlete and he can take anything to the house. That makes him a top 5 option given the fact that he's actually getting volume now for the rest of the season. And as far as Mike Gesicki goes, I wish we could quit Mike Gesicki and just drop him, but he's still in my top 15 because the position is scarce. And Preston Williams being out definitely helps his target floor. So if you need to play Mike Gesicki, then you can. But again, if you have a better option, I think after like the top 10 or so tight ends, it really, really falls off. I'll go to my top 10 tight end rankings right now. I have Austin Hooper at 12, Jared Cook at 13. So after Jared Cook, I have Mike Gesicki at 14, and that is the drop-off. Right from Jared Cook to Mike Gesicki is a massive, massive drop-off in my opinion. I think after that, it's just random slappies that could go off any other week. To the Cowboys and Vikings in this game. In this game, we might see a lot of bad quarterback play. Anyways, sit Andy Dalton because it looks like he's going to be on track to play. But the offensive line is decimated and the offense is completely anemic right now. So I just don't start Andy Dalton. I don't care who his weapons are. And then stream Kirk Cousins in this game because the Dallas Cowboys defense is completely spongy. Cousins has always been a guy that you can use in great matchups, as I've talked about with many other guys, like Mayfield, Goff, Tua, all these other guys. He's currently QB 19 for me against the Cowboys defense. I think I would start him over the guys I just mentioned, Mayfield, Goff, and Tua. So Kirk Cousins is a streamable option if you need someone there. To the running back position in this game, Cook finally came back to earth against the Bears. I mean, came back to earth is a relative term because he got like 40 touches, but he came back to earth in terms of not scoring 45 fantasy points on those 40 touches. So he's definitely human against bad matchups, but this is not a bad matchup against the Dallas Cowboys run defense, who we've seen Kenyon Drake, who's only had one good game this entire season, actually decimate this defense. So Dalvin Cook is my RB1 on the week, and it probably won't change, to be honest, because he's on a tear right now. He's probably the favorite to win Offensive Player of the Year. And if you have him in fantasy right now, he is probably making you look very smart. And he's making myself look very stupid for passing on him for CEH in the first round of my draft. In terms of Zeke, a guy who has not been good this season, hopefully Andy Dalton coming back can bring some life to the offense. I think he helps. I think he's better than Garrett Gilbert, but I don't know. Zeke just needs to honestly just stop playing like shit, because if he plays well, he is a good running back and he's great for fantasy, but he is not playing well and the offense is terrible. So hopefully Zeke can start getting back on track if you need Zeke for your playoff push. Chances are, though, if you drafted Zeke, you're probably out of the playoff picture, because spending the second or third overall pick on a guy and then having him bust out the way he has, probably not great for your fantasy team. But if you somehow are in the playoff hunt and you still have Zeke, you really need him to step up these next couple of weeks. To the wide receiver position in this game, you have Amari Cooper. I think he's the only one you can start confidently on the Dallas Cowboys. And then both of the Vikings receivers are confident starts for me as well, Jefferson and Thielen. And I think you can low-end flex Lamb if you need to, but not a guy I really want to be starting. Amari Cooper has been fine when Dalton is in the lineup. He gets a lot of targets. So he's a top 24 guy for me. As you can see him going up against Chris Jones in coverage, not the Chiefs defensive tackle. So, I mean, Chris Jones is a cornerback for the Vikings. Apparently he should probably wipe the floor with him. But the question is can Andy Dalton actually get him the ball, because this offense is terrible. But CeeDee Lamb, as I mentioned, is usable, but I'm not confident. He goes up against Jeff Gladney in the slot. I guess. I mean, CeeDee Lamb has been kind of up and down this season in terms of fantasy production. Had Dak stayed healthy, CeeDee Lamb might have been Offensive Rookie of the Year. A little bit unfortunate for him there. But to the wide receiver side on the Vikings, you have Justin Jefferson going up against Cheeto Awuzie and Adam Thielen going up against Anthony Brown. We saw Jefferson and Thielen should be in for a field day in this one, going up against those two guys after what they did in a horrible matchup this past Monday against Chicago. I expected both of them to disappoint. That was not the case. And then on the tight end side of this game, this is how you know the tight end position is disgusting. I wrote stream Schultz and stream Rudolph. That's how bad the tight end position is that both of those two guys are in my top 20. Now, of course, if Irv Smith is back, then you definitely start Irv Smith. I think he is a way better streaming option than Kyle Rudolph if Irv Smith is there. But Irv Smith has a groin injury, and we're kind of just monitoring that situation. But if he's out, then that makes Rudolph a desperation play, and same with Dalton Schultz. Neither of these guys are great, but they're both in my top 20 if you have a guy like Evan Ingram on bye, or if you have Jordan Reed on bye, or whoever else you might have on bye. I think you can use either of these guys in a complete pinch. All right, final 4 o'clock game of the window. We have the Packers at the Colts. Start Aaron Rodgers and sit Phillip Rivers in this game. Pretty simple. Rodgers definitely sees a downtick facing the defense, allowing only 14.8 fantasy points per game to the quarterback position. I have Aaron Rodgers down at QB 12 when he generally hovers in that top 6 range, because this is a very tough matchup. And I don't expect him to have a great game in this one, but you definitely still have to start him based on his weekly floor and just how good he is. So to the running back position in this game, start Aaron Jones, flex Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines. Is it sexy? No. But this Green Bay matchup is one that I've mentioned is favorable for all running backs, receiving running backs, workhorses on the ground. Like anyone who carries the ball, touches the ball at the running back position does well against the Green Bay Packers. So there should be enough in this game to make both of these guys top 30, both Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines. They're allowing 33.1 fantasy points per game to the running back position. So I mean, I guarantee if you have Jonathan Taylor, as I do in one league, you don't want to trust him, but I am going to start him this week against Green Bay because the matchup is just too good. If you can't start him this week, you're never going to be able to start him. is the way I look at it. So to the wide receiver position in this game, the only really strong start in this one is Devontae Adams, obviously, but I think you can low end flex Michael Pittman if you need to. Pittman was obviously one of the big waiver wire ads of the week. He's going up against Josh Jackson in this matchup. I want to see Pittman do it again personally before I can trust him in my lineup. But I think if you're in a pinch, you can start him because we saw a high target volume from him this past week, and he looked really good doing it. On the Packers side of things, as I mentioned, Adams is the only startable guy in this offense. MVS is a flash in the pan against a dog shit defense in the Jaguars last week. This defense is not Jacksonville's. It's the complete opposite of Jacksonville's. They are number 1 in the NFL in DVOA. Jacksonville's number 32 in the NFL in DVOA. So there's no way that MVS is going to be doing what he did last week against the Colts defense. So you definitely want to be sitting him. To the tight end position in this game, both are desperation plays, as I mentioned. Again, I wish we could just quit Robert Tonyan and quit Trey Burton, but both are in my top 20 because of the position scarcity. So if you have Ingram, Jimmy Graham, or Jordan Reed on bye, you can use either of these guys in a pinch. But again, I don't want to. Like they're both bad options at tight end. So hopefully you have guys that like Mark Andrews, and you don't have to worry about the tight end position, or Darren Waller and Travis Kelce, because if you are streaming tight ends, this is not a good time to be doing so. To the Sunday night football game. This one should be fun. Chiefs at Raiders. Patrick Mahomes is obviously a start, and I think you could stream Derek Carr in this one as well. Great outing by Derek Carr in the first meeting against Kansas City. We saw him put up a top 5 QB performance on the week that week. I'd expect him to see definitely usable passing volume in this one, with the Chiefs likely to score a lot of points because they're the Kansas City Chiefs. Derek Carr is probably going to be forced to throw the ball quite a bit. And then Pat's Pat. He's top 3 quarterback every week. To the running back position in this game, my start of the week is Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So Clyde Edwards-Helaire, why is he my start of the week? They were just on bye. The reason he's my start of the week is because they are coming off of their bye. A reminder that CEH, despite them coming off of their bye, still ranks 6th in the NFL in evaded tackles per attempt, 9th in yards after contact per attempt, and 15th in yards per route run. Those are all metrics that are very important when evaluating running back talents, which means CEH is a good player. It's not his problem that he's not getting any volume. The Chiefs have only ran the ball 38 times at a 28% rate since Le'Veon Bell arrived. If you see the Rotoviz game screener allows you to pull up splits of teams past couple games, and you can see right there, they've rushed the ball 18 times the past 3 games. That's how many rush attempts per game that they're committing to, and they only have 60 rushing yards over these last 3 games, and only like a bit of rushing touchdowns as well. But you can see previous weeks, they were up near 30 rush attempts per game and over 140 rushing yards per game. So I think this has got to regress positively. I think it's going to go back to the normal. And I think with CEH coming off the bye week, they might realize, as the Lions and the Ravens realize, that they need to get their rookie running back involved more, whether it's in the passing game, on the ground, on the goal line, whatever. I expect some kind of uptick for Clyde Edwards-Helaire in this matchup. Not to mention the Raiders are just terrible against the run. And then as far as the Raiders side of things, you obviously will be starting Josh Jacobs because 21 carries, 4 targets for Jacobs and 2 rushing touchdowns is absolutely gorgeous. That's exactly what you want to see him do every single week, because that's what you drafted Josh Jacobs to be. That's what I thought his ceiling could be, was that kind of volume and that kind of like rushing touchdowns every single week. I thought that was Josh Jacobs's like ceiling this year. And if he done that every single week, he probably would have been like an RB2 or 3 on the season. So Jacobs, although been a little bit disappointing though thus far this season, I think he's really going to start turning it on, and we saw that last week. To the wide receiver position in this game, you start Tyreek Hill, and then I would say you low end flex anyone else in this game. Unfortunately for the wide receiver position in this game, I think this is going to be a high scoring game, but the problem is that these two teams have many other weapons in the passing game between the 2 tight ends and the running backs and all that kind of stuff, and Tyreek Hill, obviously. Hill makes for the only guy that is a must start in this game for the Chiefs. But if you want to risk it with any of Mecole Hardman, Sammy Watkins, or Demarcus Robinson, I would start them in that order if you need to use one of them. And I think they're usable in a pinch because I do expect this to be a high scoring game. But again, you should have better options to play going forward. I think Hardman, I have the highest at like 44. So I think you should have other top 40 options, potentially even on your waiver wire, that you could start over Mecole Hardman. But if you want a ceiling play, you have some bye weeks you need to fill in. Mecole Hardman's definitely not a terrible option. As you can see the matchups on the screen there, you have Tyreek Hill going up against LaMarcus Joyner, which is the best matchup on the field, which is why I say I think Tyreek Hill is going to be the best receiver in this game for the Chiefs. And Sammy Watkins and Demarcus Robinson, you can mix Mecole Hardman in there. All the corners for the Raiders are not very good. So Again, there's probably going to be a second receiver that does well in this game. The question is, who is it? Is it Demarcus Robinson? Is it Sammy Watkins? Is it Mecole Hardman? We probably all want it to be Mecole Hardman, but the chances that are Demarcus Robinson or Sammy Watkins get that work is pretty high as well. So just something to monitor there. Same goes for the Raiders. All these receivers are not reliable. Any of Ruggs, Renfro, and Aguilar are startable in this game in that order, as I just mentioned, but none of them are great options. You see Henry Ruggs going up against Rashad Breeland is actually a bad matchup. Hunter Renfro has the best matchup on the field against Tyrann Mathieu, but Hunter Renfro, it's like he's not very a high ceiling guy. And then Nelson Aguilar is Nelson Aguilar, even though he's a little bit better this year. So I would stay away from the Raiders receiver core if you need to, or unless you absolutely have to. I'd probably go with Ruggs just because we saw him break a big play against the Chiefs last time they played. To the tight end position, you start both of them. Obviously, they're my tight end 1 and 2 on the rest for the rest of the season, on the week, for all eternity until George Kittle comes back. And the reason is because the receiver production is pretty inconsistent among their respective teams. The Raiders are not a consistent team that throws to the receiver position. They actually rank dead last in the NFL at I think it's 43% that they're throwing to the wide receiver position. And it's because their running backs and tight ends are getting all the targets. So Waller and Kelsey, absolutely no worries about starting those guys. To the final game of the slate. And this is my Tampa Bay Buccaneers. For the love of God, I'm scared shitless of this game because it's a primetime game, and we've seen the 3 games the Buccaneers have played on primetime have been the Saints game where we got slaughtered, the Bears game that we had a million penalties in and lost, and the Giants game who we almost lost, but we were barely able to squeak out. So the primetime has not been friendly to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for their offense, for their defense, for anything. So hopefully they can finally get it on track in primetime and win this game handedly. I don't think that's how it's going to go. I think the Rams are a solid team, and I think they're probably going to keep this one close. But hopefully the Bucs just don't shoot themselves in the foot, and it's close because the Rams are playing well, not because the Bucs are playing bad. So to the quarterback position in this game, you sit Jared Goff and you stream Tom Brady. The Rams have been borderline Colts level excellent against the pass these past couple of weeks, and honestly over the full season. So Brady is currently my quarterback 11. And Matt Ryan, Big Ben Roethlisberger, and Deshaun Watson, and even Jameis Winston, if you're feeling bold, make for better starts than Tom Brady in this game because the Rams are quite good against the pass, and we don't really know the status of Ali Marpet yet, who is the best offensive lineman for the Tampa Bay Bucs. And if he's out, Aaron Donald is probably going to wreck this game. So hopefully Ali Marpet's able to come back from his concussion. He's been out for about a week and a half now, so he should be ready to come back out of the concussion protocol because we really need him as a Bucs fan. I really want to see him play against Aaron Donald. To the running back position in this game, you can flex Darrell Henderson and then you start Ronald Jones. While one of these backfields of the two that we're talking about here got clearer, the other got muddier. So the Rams running backs, Cam Akers had 10 carries last week. Darrell Henderson had 7 carries, 1 target. Like Malcolm Brown had 6 carries, 2 targets. Like this backfield got real muddy real quick now that they're all healthy. So I think Darrell Henderson is still the back to own here. For now, obviously you want to stash Cam Akers in case anything happens to any of these guys, but there's a good chance this is a 3-way timeshare for the rest of the season. I really hope it's not, for the sake of people who own Darrell Henderson. I think he should still be pretty solid, but there's a good chance the same exact thing happens this next game and for the rest of the season. And this is a bad matchup too. So Darrell Henderson's like a back end RB2, high end RB3 for me because the running back position is pretty thin, but I don't really want to start him if I don't have to. And then on the Ronald Jones side of things, so I tweeted this out Monday morning. Not only did Ronald Jones get benched after fumbling not only did Ronald Jones not get benched, he usually gets benched after fumbling in favor of Fournette. He also dropped a pass too. He played 47 snaps, which was 59% of the total snap share, to 24 of Leonard Fournette's 36% of the snaps that he had. And Fournette was largely in there only on like 3rd and longs and obvious passing situations. So we saw the role that Ronald Jones has carved out for himself stay the same, regardless of him fumbling, regardless of him dropping a pass or two. So this is good news for Ronald Jones. This is great news because Arians clearly has given him a longer leash after this week, and he saw he's seen it. Against the Giants, we couldn't run the ball. The Tampa Bay Bucs could not run the ball against the Giants. When Ronald Jones got benched for fumbling in that game, Arians said he felt really bad about that. That Ronald Jones was down on himself after that play because that led to a touchdown and the Bucs ended up being behind in that game the whole time and had to eventually come back and win it. But Arians has given him a longer leash because he's seen the difference in how good of a runner Ronald Jones is versus how bad of a runner Leonard Fournette is. I've seen clips on Twitter of Leonard Fournette just missing wide open holes and like cutting back right into defenders. He's terrible at running the ball. all he really does for this team is catch the ball and fall down. Like, he doesn't even do anything after the catch. If we had a guy like Chase Edmonds or something like that, this passing offense would be so much better, because our running backs, neither guy, actually all three, because including Shady McCoy and Keyshawn Vaughn, if you want to throw him in, none of these guys can catch or do anything after the catch with a run, with the receiving in the running back room. Because if we had a running back like that, I can assure you they'd be very valuable for fantasy, because Brady is still throwing to the running backs despite all of them being bad at catching. To the wide receiver position in this game, Evans, Godwin, Kupp, Woods, AB, all of them startable. All of these guys are great players, but this may be a low-scoring affair. Both of these defenses are playing well, and the receivers are really not playing that well in terms of the caliber of receivers that they all are. Godwin looks to be the best play of the Bucs due to the tough matchups for the other two. You see Chris Godwin going up against Troy Hill in the slot, Antonio Brown against Darius Williams. Darius Williams actually like the third highest graded corner on PFF right now. And then Mike Evans against Jalen Ramsey. So I don't think Jalen Ramsey's going to shadow, because he hasn't been a guy who's been shadowing this year, but he is the primary matchup for Mike Evans and Antonio Brown. Chris Godwin, being that he plays in the slot, is going to get the best matchup on the field, because you don't know which one Mike Evans and Antonio Brown is going to be on Jalen Ramsey on any given play, but you know Chris Godwin is going to be in the slot if they have three receivers out there. So I think he is the best receiver play of the Bucs receiving core. Robert Woods obviously has a tough matchup in this game, probably a shadow matchup for him against Carlton Davis, who's been excellent so far this season. This definitely makes Cooper Kupp the stronger start. Both guys have been disappointing, in my opinion, relative to expectations. I expected both of these dudes to be top 12 receivers, locked and loaded, coming into the season. Neither guy has really delivered on that. And it's not really at the fault of their own, even though neither of them are really playing at like excellent levels. It's because the passing offense is kind of bad. Jared Goff ain't playing that well. And they just can insist on running the ball over and over and over again. So if I were Sean McVay, I would use Woods and Kupp more, because they're the best two players on offense that they have. But what do I know? I'm just a guy on YouTube. I'm not an NFL coach. And then finally in this game, to the tight end position, you start Rob Gronkowski and you sit both Rams tight ends. Even if one of the Rams tight ends performs, you will not be able to guess which one. So I would sit them both and just look for better options. And as far as Gronk goes, he was actually the only tight end, probably of any tight end that was started last week, that actually performed, and it was because he had a touchdown. Gronk has just consistently been involved. He's been involved in the red zone, been involved on third down. Just he is involved. So he makes for a guy that is a solidified top 5 tight end rest of the season for me as well. And that's it. That's the end of the Week 11 Start Sit show. If you guys enjoyed, make sure you leave a like on the video. Helps us out tremendously as usual. Comment any of your thoughts down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, and I will see you guys next time.